A lot of people have requested the old Susan Rice videos that were originally posted in 2017 regarding the Obama administration spying on the Trump campaign. So just to let everybody know, they're currently available on library.
Within one day of the shootings, the FBI sought and obtained court orders supported by probable cause authorizing the Bureau to search the contents of both phones as part of its investigation.
Bill Barr. He's the man that I predicted was there for a reason. It would only probably be there about 2 years. We shall see. But nonetheless, as you see him speak on something pretty much innocuous, doesn't really have much bearing in politics, straightforward, terrorist, and the steps that they take to gain access. He's reading. He looks up every so often. He's swaying back and forth as he does it, and he goes back to reading. Look up, sway back down, read, sway back up, look, rinse and repeat. So this would be our baseline. This is what it looks like when Bill Barr reads, and there's no stressor or emotional pull in his mind.
The problem was that the phones were locked, and the FBI did not have the passwords, so they needed help to get in. And we asked Apple for assistance, and the president asked Apple for assistance. Unfortunately, Apple would not help us unlock the phones. Apple had deliberately designed them so that only the user, in this case the terrorist, could gain access to their contents.
So as we continue with this innocuous case, Bill Barr is Bill Barr. He's very honest. It's not like you really have to dig so far into his brain to see if he's lying to you or not. He tells you they purposely did this. And he's a little bit irritated. You can kind of see it with the rise and fall as his emphasis goes into this. He's not hiding it from you. It's not some covert mission. He's telling you this is an inconvenience. And you need to know this. Why? Because we're just getting a baseline for our body language. We don't really care at this moment. Bigger things in the world and bigger fish to fish.
We will now begin the question and answer session. To ask a question, you may press star, then 1 on your touch-tone phone. If you are using a speakerphone, please pick up your handset before pressing the keys.
That's so silly.
To withdraw your question, please press star, then 2 at any time. When you pose your question, please state who the question is for. At this time, we will pause momentarily to assemble our roster. Our first question comes from Pete Williams with NBC News.
Hi, Pete.
Mr. Attorney General, 2 questions, if I may. You said that al-Shamrani was associated with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Would you describe this as inspired or directed? And secondly, President Trump has recently said that he wants to see the Justice Department prosecute figures of the Obama administration, President Obama and Joseph Biden, for what he calls crimes.
Now the real meat that everyone's very interested in, considering the climate. So this question comes through, and what do we see, Ray? He bows, and not in a submissive way, but more of a, I'm hiding. You're not going to see my facial expression. I don't want you to see my body language. This is something I don't want to talk about. The assumptions can go rampant at this point, but that's just the body. Ray doesn't want to approach this subject. He wants to hide from it. And Barr is Stonewall. Stonewall Barr.
Is that something DOJ will do?
Okay, let me ask the
Is that something the DOJ will do? As soon as he hears that, talking about Ray, he's like, oh, FBI is not in this quarter. Yes, I can pick myself back up and not hide. This is a DOJ question.
director to respond to the first question, and then I'll come back and answer the second.
So, with respect to al-Shamrani's connections with AQAP, I think we are describing today what we're able to share at this point. Some of it is very much ongoing as we exploit different leads coming out of his 2 devices. It is certainly more than just inspired. We know, for example, that he was sharing plans and tactics with them. We know that he was coordinating with them and providing an opportunity for them to.
So as we watch Ray, he's doing a lot of brain search while he's speaking, which is definitely appropriate and glad to be seen. He's being very gated because of the parts of the brain that he's accessing. He's got a limp, which I'm assuming, if you know how the body works, you put pressure in one area, the other area gets stressed, pain comes into mind. So you constantly are shifting anyways just to not have pain. But he's got the underlying stress, and we see that because he's not really loose. And that's just answering a question on an ongoing investigation with prosecutorial implications down the road. So you want to be very guarded on that regardless, which is going to cause stress.
To take credit for the attack. And so I think I'll have to just, for the moment, stick with some of the verbs that we've used already.
The verbs that we use already, you see a slight smile. More indication of Ray being Ray. And that's not in a bad sense. It just means that his personality does come out when he speaks, even when he's trying to gate what he's saying. It's almost like a Barr personality, but Barr's is a lot more louder and much more easy flowing.
And more to come on that as we continue to build out what we now know from his phones.
Pete, I'm not going to comment on what the president or Vice President Biden, for that matter, say in connection with their campaigns, but I will address the role of the Department of Justice. I think, as you know, I've commented since I have been Attorney General and even during my confirmation.
So as we watch him in this, we're not giving that good eye contact that we saw at the very beginning, the baseline that we were talking about. They look down, they read, they come up, he sways into it, and it's constant. Now, mind you, he's not really reading. It's just an avoidance. And although there's no audience in front of him, usually, a normal mind will look for a focal point. And it's on a strong subject, it's at eye level. On a weaker standing, it's below eye level. And when you're taking the high ground above everyone, it's above eye level. So even though there's no one there to look at, there's a focal point. And apparently the focal point is down.
Hearings that over the past few decades, there have been increasing attempts.
And then we bring up our hand as an anchor point to keep the body up so it doesn't slouch. Because as you get into, in this case, a subject that is extremely touchy, has huge, not only political ramifications, but economic ramifications. The idea of prosecuting a former president in a land that is not supposed to be corrupt would send shockwaves, not only in this country, but around the world economically. So understand that stress and why he's doing what he's doing in his body language.
To use the criminal justice system as a political weapon. The legal tactic has been to gin up allegations of criminality by one's political opponents based on the flimsiest of legal theories. This is not a good development. This is not good for our political life.
I was going to sit there and see how long he was going to fling his hand out in that circular moment where he flings it, circles, but he brought it down. Basically, he's literally just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks and what sounds good. How do you tell the truth when in this instance the truth would be more devastating?
And it's not good for the criminal justice system. And as long as I'm Attorney General, the criminal justice system will not be used for partisan political ends.
And now we go back to our baseline. So as long as I'm Attorney General and his body starts going back to what it was doing in the beginning when he was talking about this innocuous case, doesn't matter. As long as he's Attorney General, in his truth, his world, his belief, the justice system will operate by the rule of law.
And this is especially true for the upcoming elections in November. We live in a very divided country, right?
So we see he starts this off. We live in and the arm as he's saying this comes up for the anchor. So this says, this point, because he took in that deep breath, he brings himself up high. He's not trying to hold himself up with his arm. He's bringing it up as this is my stand.
Right now, and I think that it is critical that we have an election.
And we're giving those good eye contacts.
Where the American people are allowed to make a decision, a choice, between President Trump and Vice President Biden based on a robust debate of policy issues. And we cannot allow this process to be hijacked by efforts to drum up criminal investigations of either candidate.
So he's anchored himself in his mind, his truth, his belief, that the elections should be based on policy debate. That's his anchor. That's his stand. So if you want to know where the DOJ is with it, that's his firm footing. That does not mean the mind is stuck in that area. It just means firmly, I don't want to go after people without law, as he said in the beginning. Everything should be based on policy debate. So if his body's singing in the beginning about the rule of law being evenly distributed, and his body sings as he just gets done talking about how the presidential election should be with policy debates, it would say that both are true and both will go together. So if the law is broken, regardless of your political affiliation or what you're running for, you will get the full force of the law. If you have done things that are not law-breaking but are just seen as morally bankrupt, the law is not going to help your political opponent go after you. And that is Barr's truth. That is Barr's belief system. It's not a bad one. It's actually one I like, but it is what it is.
And I'm committed that this election will be conducted without this kind of interference. Any effort to pursue an investigation of either candidate has to be approved by me.
And you see that hand movement come in as he taps the desk on each word. So that's his emphasis not only in his words and in his eye contact, but his hand is hammering it out as well.
Now, what happened to the president, and I've said this many times, what happened to the president in the 2016 election and throughout the first 2 years of his administration was abhorrent. It was a grave injustice, and it was unprecedented in American history. The law enforcement and intelligence apparatus of this country were involved in advancing a false and utterly baseless Russian collusion narrative against the president. The proper investigative and prosecutive standards of the Department of Justice were abused, in my view, in order to reach a particular result. We saw two different standards of justice emerge, one that applied to President Trump and his associates, and the other that applied to everybody else. We can't allow this ever to happen again. The Durham investigation is trying to get to the bottom of what happened, and it will determine whether there were any federal laws broken, and if there were, those who broke the laws will be held to account.
Now, he probably does have notes down there for the Durham investigation, understanding that this is probably going to be something that's asked. But you notice how the arm comes down and we go back into hidey hole time. Why hide? Because there's information you don't want out. Morally good, morally bankrupt? Who knows? But it's information he doesn't want out.
But this cannot be, and it will not be, a tit-for-tat exercise. We are not going to lower the standards just to achieve a result. The only way to stop this vicious cycle, the only way to break away from a dual system of justice is to make sure that we scrupulously apply the single and proper standard of justice for everybody. Now, under the longstanding standards of the department, criminal charges are appropriate only when we have enough evidence to prove each element of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the standard we're applying. Now, I have a general idea of how Mr. Durham's investigation is going. And as I have indicated, some aspects of the matter are being examined as potential crimes.
So he's really getting into what he has an idea of and crimes thereof in this Durham report. And he goes even smaller in his hiding. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're talking about investigations and possibly prosecutorial crimes in the future. You keep these things close to your chest. So I can understand the hiding in this.
But we have to bear in mind what the Supreme Court recently reminded us of in the Bridgegate case. As the court said there's a difference between an abuse of power and a federal crime. Not every abuse of power, no matter how outrageous, is necessarily a federal crime. Now, as to President Obama and Vice President Biden, whatever their level of involvement, based on the information I have today, I don't expect Mr. Durham's work will lead to a criminal investigation of either man. Our concern over potential criminality is focused on others. Thanks.
So you see, his body, even though he was hiding, he was giving you his truth. His body did sway in appropriate ways. He did do appropriate brain searches. He was just hiding the investigation of Durham's knowledge that he has, which is understandable. It's annoying because, as most of us want, we want justice. But abuse of power does not necessarily mean a crime was committed. It means you need to make some damn rules where you can't abuse your power, but it doesn't mean a crime was committed. Because technically, I don't think unmasking is criminal. If you can point out a law for that, please let us all know.
Thanks for your question, Pete. The next question.
Our next question comes from TJ Thomas with ABC.
Hi, Pierre.
Good afternoon or good morning. Thank you for the time. Question number one, I have two questions, is what can you say about the relative strength of al-Qaeda in terms of what this case shows and what it says about the Saudis' ability to vet people before they send them to the United States? And then the second question has to do...
Those are really good questions considering what the press conference was really about. But he mentions Saudi's ability to vet people, and the mouth of Barr goes real tight. Now he's holding back there. Don't know what it is, but it'd be something to watch out for.
You've made clear that neither the Vice President Biden or former President Obama are currently the subject of an investigation. Can you make it clear what group of people are you focused on in terms of possible wrongdoing and or abuse? Are we talking about FBI officials or intelligence officials or both?
Thanks, Pierre. Let me just take the second part first. Obviously, with Mr. Durham's work underway, I really cannot comment on specifically who is being looked at. But I think we're all familiar with the set of circumstances that is generally being reviewed. On the first part of your question, let me just say something briefly about the vetting process. Obviously, before this incident, it was not sufficient. The Saudis have been fully cooperative throughout this investigation up till now. We're working closely with the Saudis, and the Defense Department and the Saudis have been working to buttress the screening process and the vetting process to ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. Now, as to the relative strength of al-Qaeda, let me ask the director to comment on that.
So he answers the question on Saudi Arabia. His body sings with him. But FYI, for those of you who do not know, Saudi Arabia has been going through its own kind of coup. So I'm assuming that whoever is working with them, that his body sings with him on, that he says they're working with, are quote unquote the good guys. But we won't know. It seems like now when you talk about governments, especially with watching body language, you have to realize that a lot of these governments have dueling parties just like ours. And you really need to understand as you watch and you see someone like Barr, whose body sings with him, Saudi Arabia is being very cooperative with us. It's just like someone saying the same thing of Trump's being very cooperative with us. The Trump administration is being very cooperative with us. You could be from BFE, but Congress won't pass nothing. So please understand that when you watch this body language, that dueling entities are involved, and it really depends, if it's not defined, who these individuals are talking about.
If you'd like to learn more about analysing body language, there is a video course available on Mandy's website for Gold subscribers, where Mandy teaches more about her techniques of deception detection. There's also other content such as the Crime series and Interesting Minds series, available to both Gold and Silver subscribers.
If you like it, please share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.